Support weapons. Choosing what support weapon you take can be one of the hardest choices to make in Helldivers 2, but you still always want to bring one on every mission. Today, we're going to be ranking every single support weapon in Helldivers 2. Unfortunately, I'm not counting the break-action shotgun because you can't actually unlock it or take it into a mission. This video is part 4 of my series where I rank all of the weapons in Helldivers 2. So, if you want to see primaries, secondaries, and throwables, check out my channel for more. And please keep in mind that these are my opinions, and if you disagree, you can make your own tier list using the template I made on tiermaker.com. With that out of the way, let's get on to the rankings. Let's get started at the Patriotic Administration Center with our first support weapon, the machine gun. A machine gun designed for stationary use. Trades higher power for increased recoil and reduced accuracy. The machine gun is the first support weapon that every Helldiver will use, and for good reason. It's effective against every faction, it's reliable, and it always gets the job done. The machine gun will never go out of style. Now, I view the machine gun as the baseline as which all other stratagems should be ranked. It's very average, it's good on most difficulties and against every faction. So I'm going to put it in B tier for that. It's still very good though, don't get me wrong. I just think that it is the average support weapon. Next up is the anti-material rifle, a high caliber sniper rifle, effective over long distances against light vehicle armor. This rifle must be aimed down scope. As someone who loves to fight bots, I have always loved the anti-material rifle. It is an extremely effective way to deal damage over long distances, certainly better than the self-proclaimed sniper rifle that's taking up space in my armory. It's not that great against bugs, but against the bots and the Illuminate, it's a really solid choice for taking down medium enemies and dealing damage to the heavy ones too. So I'm putting the anti-material rifle in A tier, just because I love doing big damage over long ranges. It's just really fun. I love sniping enemies. Next up is the Stalwart, a compact, low-caliber machine gun. Trades power for ease of use, with faster reloading than heavier machine guns. The Stalwart is the little sibling of the machine gun. It's basically like a juiced primary weapon in the support weapon slot. It's a good substitute for an assault rifle if your primary slot is taken up by something like the crossbow or the blitzer. The biggest downside of the Stalwart is of course the lack of armor penetration, so it's best against the bugs. But it can also be used against the Illuminate to decent success. Now the Stalwart does have its place in the game, but I'm personally putting it in C tier. I think that is outclassed by the other machine guns most of the time, but what it does have is the mobile reload, so if that's really important to you, then you could bump it up a few tiers. Next up is the Expendable Anti-Tank. Calls down 2 EAT-17 expendable anti-tank weapons. The EAT is a one-use rocket capable of damaging heavily armored targets. The EAT is a unique support weapon for a number of reasons. The first reason is, of course, that it is expendable. You can only fire a single shot from it before tossing it to the ground. You also get 2 of them, meaning you can share the fun with a squad mate if you want. And the best part about it is definitely the cooldown. It's only a minute long. Every minute, you get 2 of these bad boys at your disposal, and at your immediate position. Plus, it's just good against every faction. Now, despite all of those great things I just said about the EAT, I'm also going to put it in B tier. You'll see later on, I prefer other launchers typically over it. It still is very good, and it has its place, but I'm putting it in B tier, because that's just how I feel. Next up is the Recoilless Rifle. A recoilless rifle effective against vehicle armor. Includes support backpack required for reloading. What really needs to be said about the recoilless rifle? You point it at something, and that thing is gone. The standard HEAT shells, which stands for High Explosive Anti-Tank, will easily destroy armored structures and dropships and vehicles, and it will kill basically any enemy in a single shot. There are also the HE shells, which stands for High Explosive, simply put, and which have a better explosive radius, but at the cost of armor penetration. Knowing when to switch between these can make the recoilless rifle very versatile and effective at killing everything in the game, and I do mean everything. I'm putting the recoilless rifle in S tier. I think that's where it belongs. I use it probably the most out of every support weapon in the game. I'm in love with the thing. So That's where it belongs for me. Next up is the flamethrower, an incendiary weapon for close range. Will ignite targets, terrain, and any flammable teammates. The flamethrower is another favorite of mine. Most of my time on the bug front has been spent with this thing. Not much needs to be said about the flamethrower. It can kill just about any enemy if you're in the right position to do so. While it's of course the best against the bugs, it's pretty good against Illuminates too. And you can find use with it on the bot front, but it's not very reliable. You would have to have extraordinarily good positioning to make that a reality. But hey, 2 out of 3 is good for me, so flamethrower goes in A tier. Top of A tier, in fact. Next up is the autocannon. A fully automatic cannon, effective against light vehicle armor. Includes support backpack required for reloading. The autocannon is yet another great support weapon, and is easily one of the most versatile. Like the recoilless rifle, it can change between 2 ammo types, which are similar to the ammo types that the recoilless rifle has. One for direct armor penetrating damage, and another for splash damage. You can take the autocannon into any difficulty against any faction and find success. It's going into S tier. Next up is the heavy machine gun. A very powerful but difficult to wield machine gun with intense recoil. The heavy machine gun has become one of my favorite support weapons in the past few months. Trying to use it while moving is a fool's errand, but if you hunker down and stay still, you can deal tons of damage to almost any enemy in the game. It works pretty good against each faction, but it really shines against bots, since you'll be having actual firefights with them over long ranges, where being stationary isn't a problem. I'm also putting the heavy machine gun in A tier, above the AMR. Next up, we have the airburst rocket launcher. Fires a rocket that detonates within proximity of a target, and deploys a cluster of explosive bomblets. The airburst is a really cool weapon. Watching all of those cluster bombs go off is really satisfying to see. Unfortunately, it's very niche when compared to other launchers. There are a few cases where it's excellent, like when you're shooting down a pack of shriekers, or if you can perfectly place it into the middle of a horde of bugs or voteless, but that's not always going to be the case, and there are usually better options to pick that can do more than the airburst rocket launcher can. So I'm putting the airburst rocket launcher in C tier. High C tier, I'd say, because it's still pretty good, but not good enough. Next up is the Commando, an expendable missile launcher with 4 laser-guided missiles. The Commando is an alternative to the EAT, instead chambering 4 missiles at once in a single launcher. I can't say that I'm a very big fan of this one, and while you can still get use out of it, it just feels like they split the EAT's firepower into 4 rockets, but with the added benefit of having it in a single launcher, of course. I suppose that choosing between the Commando and the EAT will come down to personal preference, but it's just not for me. I'm also putting the Commando in C tier. Yeah, low C tier. I just don't like it very much. Next up is the Railgun, an experimental weapon which prioritizes armor penetration. Must be charged between shots, so choose targets carefully. In terms of direct damage, the Railgun is one of the best support weapons out there. It's a very effective anti-tank weapon, and it deals insane damage when used in unsafe mode. But of course, that means you need to be very careful when using it. One of the best things about the Railgun is that you don't need a backpack to reload it, and it reloads very fast when considering the amount of damage a single round can do. This is just a downright good pick whenever you're not sure what to take with you. Now, I would probably put the Railgun in a very high A tier. I personally don't use it as much as the recoilless rifle or the autocannon because I find it's harder to use than those, especially in unsafe mode when you run the risk of overloading your weapon and destroying it, when these two at the top are super consistent and super good at doing everything. Next up is the Spear, an anti-tank homing missile which must lock on to its target before launch. Effective against large and armored enemies. The Spear is the ultimate weapon for destroying armor. It penetrates more armor than any other weapon in the entire game, and it deals immense damage on impact. The lock-on requirement is both a blessing and a curse, depending on who you ask. It's great for accuracy, making it difficult to miss your target, but it also means that you'll be spending more time aiming than something like the recoilless rifle. The Spear is excellent on the bot front. It turns their most fortified bases into an XP pinata. The only pure downside is the limited ammo that you can store in the backpack, but with something as powerful as the Spear, that won't be a very big problem anyways. So I'm putting the Spear in high A tier as well. It's one of my favorite launchers, but it doesn't have the same versatility that the recoilless rifle does, so it's down a peg from that. Next up, we have the Wasp launcher, a versatile missile launcher loaded with 7 lock-on homing missiles. These can either be fired from the launcher directly or as an airburst. Includes support backpack required for reloading. Produced by Stall Arms. The Wasp is another really fun weapon. Mag dumping it on burst mode against a group of enemies feels super satisfying. But don't forget about the artillery mode, allowing you to concentrate all of your ammo into a single powerful shot, which is better against larger and more armored enemies, of course. One of the best parts about this weapon is how quickly it locks on, and how far the range is. You can almost immediately lock on to an enemy that is halfway across the map and start raining hell on them. The Wasp is another great choice against every faction. And for that, I'm gonna put it in, like a low A tier. Yeah, low A tier. Now, we're moving on to the engineering bay, starting off with the grenade launcher. A grenade launcher effective against armored infantry, not intended for use against vehicle armor or fortified buildings. The grenade launcher is the best at what it does. It's a quick way to deal some explosive damage to a group of enemies, and it's fantastic at destroying enemy structures as well, particularly bug holes. It reloads fast and doesn't require a backpack, so you can stack even more damage with a guard dog or add some defense with a shield generator. The only downside is that it doesn't penetrate heavy armor, which is a really important thing for a support weapon to do, in my opinion. So I'm going to put it in the top of A tier, tippy top of A tier, because if it had heavy armor penetration, it might be the best stratagem in the whole game. But it doesn't, so I'm putting it top of A tier, because it's still fantastic at what it does. Next up is the laser cannon, a laser weapon firing a continuous beam. Doesn't require ammunition, but will need heatsink replaced if it overheats. The laser cannon isn't one I'm a very big fan of. While it's pretty good against the hordes of bugs and voteless, it can still leave you vulnerable due to a lack of instant damage. As far as support weapons go, this one doesn't have enough utility for me to bring it very often. This one is definitely a personal thing. I know a lot of people really love the laser cannon, but I'm looking for more out of my support weapons. I'm looking for something different. It's still pretty fun to hose down a bunch of bugs with it though. So I'm gonna put it in B tier around. It's fun, it's cool, I just don't think that it does what I need it to do. Next up is the arc thrower. Projects an arc of lightning at close range. Charges up to project bolts, and may discharge through multiple targets. Although I'm not a fan of the blitzer, I actually do like the arc thrower. I find the range to be decent, and the damage isn't that bad. And on top of that, it of course stuns enemies. If you're bringing the arc thrower, you should probably bring a guard dog with you. That way you can stun lock an enemy and let your drone pal do the rest. It might not be the best support weapon out there, or even one of my favorites, but it is definitely usable and viable. And so for that, I'm putting it in like a mid B tier. I think that it's, yeah, pretty average. Well, what I can say about it is that it's not replaceable right now. It's really good at what it does. Next up, we have the Quasar Cannon. Charges up to fire a powerful, explosive energy burst. Has a long cooldown period after firing. The Quasar Cannon is like a side grade to the recoilless rifle. The pros are that it doesn't need to be manually reloaded, so you can stay mobile. And you don't need a support backpack because it has infinite ammo. But the cons are that you need to charge it up before shooting, and it deals less damage overall. And the recharge between shots can be considered a bad thing too. If you're safe and stationary, the recoilless rifle does actually reload faster. So this is another one that comes down to personal preference, and I definitely prefer the recoilless rifle. I'm putting the Quasar Cannon in a lower A tier, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna put it around here, I think. It's good. I just don't like it all that much. Now, we're moving on to the chemical agents category, with our final support weapon, the Sterilizer. Atomizes caustic chemicals into a fine mist that liquefies sensitive electronics and tissues, blinds and slows down most enemies. On paper, the Sterilizer is a great idea, but in practice, it's really bad. The range is terrible, the damage is subpar, and for some reason it has this weird recoil, even though it's just shooting gas like 6 feet in front of you. The easiest way to tell you how bad this thing is by simply comparing it to the flamethrower. The flamethrower has better range, better damage, and better area denial. While the sterilizer does have the gas confusion effect, that doesn't really matter when the enemy is going to be so up close to you that by the time you can even hit them with it, you'll already be the closest enemy to them. They won't have a reason to attack their allies or get very confused at all if you're standing right there in front of them. The sterilizer is just a worse version of the flamethrower in my experience. I don't know why I would ever want to take this thing. It's a D tier. And so here are our final rankings. There might be some changes I might make. I think I do prefer the Wasp over the Quasar Cannon, and even over the AMR. I'm gonna put those up there. Might move the Quasar Cannon down to like a higher B tier actually. And the rest of them, I'm pretty happy with how I ranked these. I think that, again, these are all just opinions. These are all just my opinions. I'm not saying that your favorite weapon is bad, but I'm happy with how I ranked these. Sterilizer, trash, hate it, can't stand it. And recoilless rifle is the pinnacle of human society, so there you go. And that's every support weapon in Helldivers 2, each one of them ranked where I think they belong. If you have watched all the way to the end here, then please leave a like on this video, and leave a comment about your favorite support weapons in Helldivers 2. Subscribe if you want to see more videos about Helldivers 2 and other co-op games. I'm gonna be making another video soon about Payday 3, due to some recent news with that game. I've also been thinking about maybe playing some Deep Rock Galactic, and maybe streaming more games too. Anyways, that's all I have for today, so this is the SES Prophet of Dawn signing off.